Hey guys, tonight we step into a part of World War II history that wasn't written for the textbooks, the kind of story you have to squint at to believe. You're in uniform, heavy wool, scratching at your neck end, the air smells faintly of diesel and damp concrete. Somewhere above ground, the war is still raging, but down here, far from the front lines, a different battle is about to begin. They've told you this will make you more effective, but there's a grin on the commander's face that makes you think this isn't just another ration of black coffee. And just between us, you probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I want to see how far this little bedtime crew reaches across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ride to the facility has been long enough for the world to change around you without you noticing when the truck's suspension squeaks at every bump and the wooden benches dig into your thighs. At first, there was moonlight streaming through the canvas flaps, but somewhere along the way, the sky outside went pitch black. No stars, just a dark so dense it swallows the edges of the road. You catch glimpses of silhouette tall pines standing like silent sentries until even those fade into shadows on shadows. When the truck slows, you feel the hum of the engine drop into a growl. It makes a final sigh and stops. The rear flap is yanked up and cold, wet air rushes in. Out, a voice barks. Not unkind, but not patient either. Your boots hit wet gravel, and you find yourself in front of what could almost pass for a drainage building, if not for the two armed guards flanking the entrance. Their rifles are slung but ready, and their faces carry that blank, polished stillness of men who've been told they're guarding something important, though not necessarily why. Above them, a single bulb dangles in a cage fixture, casting a pool of yellow light on the ground. Rain has left tiny silver threads along the metal door. You glance around for signs of where you are, but there's nothing, no road markers, no fence lines, not even the hint of another building. Just the forest pressing in like a wall. One of the guards opens the door without a word. The hinges moan quietly, and a gust of warmer air rolls out, heavy with the smell of oil, metal, and something else. Faint, sweet, chemical. Inside, the hallway is narrow and low-ceiling. The walls, painted in that dull green the military seems to order in bulk. Your footsteps sound too loud against the smooth concrete floor. You think of speaking, maybe to ask where you're going, but your escort's silence is a kind of warning. Questions aren't wanted here. The deeper you go, the more you start to notice small, strange details. On the left wall, someone has scratched tiny tally marks into the paint clusters of 5, then another, then another. They're faint, almost hidden under a fresh coat, but not enough to erase them completely. A dented steel door you pass bears the imprint of what looks suspiciously like a boot heel, the metal puckered inward. You round a corner, and the hum starts low, constant, just at the edge of hearing. It's not coming from the walls so much as through the floor, like the bones of the building are vibrating. The hallway opens into a central room, a hub of sorts. For doors branch off, each stenciled in black: barracks, lab, storage, mess. In the center sits a desk, and behind it, a man in an officer's tunic, the color of brewed tea. His hair is slicked back, not a strand out of place. He doesn't look up right away, flipping a page in the ledger, before finally letting his eyes rise to meet yours. Those eyes feel like they're taking notes before his pen ever moves. "Welcome," he says, his voice as dry as the paper in front of him. "You'll be participating in a special assignment." The way he says special is too deliberate, like a word chosen from a menu. You'll be comfortable here, and you'll be awake, very awake. The hum seems louder now, though maybe it's just that your pulse has picked up. Your eyes drift to the barracks door, which stands slightly ajar. Inside, you can see a row of narrow cotsno pillows, just thin wool blankets, folded in perfect military squares. There's no clock on the wall, no windows, no sense of time. Your body tells you it's past midnight, but the fluorescent light buzzing overhead erases the concept of night entirely. The officer's pen clicks shut. He stands not tall, but upright in the way of a man who knows people move when he says move, and gestures toward the lab door. The letters are clean, sharp-edged, as though they were freshly stenciled yesterday. No one speaks as the guards flank you again. The door to the lab is heavier than you expect, and it seals behind you with a soft thud, like a vault closing. Inside, the air smells sharper alcohol, glass, maybe a hint of ozone. Counters line the walls, cluttered with clipboards, small amber bottles, and metal trays with instruments you can't quite identify. There's a faint ticking from somewhere, like a metronome keeping time for a song only the scientists can hear. In the far corner, a man in a white coat is adjusting something on a tray. He turns, and you see the lenses of his glasses glint, catching the light in a way that hides his eyes completely. "We'll begin shortly," he says without greeting. Behind you, the guards leave without a sound. The click of the latch echoes a little too long in your head. The man in the white coat doesn't hurry, and that's what unsettles you most. His movements are precise, deliberate, as if every gesture has been rehearsed. He could be preparing tea or loading a weapon. You wouldn't know the difference. From his expression, he gestures toward a metal stool beside the counter. "Sit." It's a single syllable, clipped and without warmth, but it doesn't need volume to carry authority. You sit. The seat is cold enough to bite through your uniform trousers. From this vantage point, you see more of the counters. Contents glass vials lined up in rows like soldiers on parade, each containing a pale, clouded liquid that shifts sluggishly when moved. Their labels are printed in blocky black letters, the kind you've seen on supply crates, but the words are strange half German, half chemical shorthand. The man picks up one vial, rolls it between his fingers, and examines it against the harsh, overhead light. The liquid inside swirls slowly, catching brief glints like tiny silver threads. "You will take this every morning," he says, without looking at you. "It will prevent sleep, increase alertness, prolong stamina." His gaze flicks up at the last word, and in that fraction of a second you feel examined like he's already taking mental notes on how you'll break. Your instinct is to ask why, but something in his eyes tells you the answer, if given, would be a fabrication anyway. He tips the vial into a small metal cup, and the liquid lands with a faint plink. It's slightly viscous, coating the sides before settling into a thin pool. The smell is faintly bitter, with a metallic edge like damp coins kept in a tin for too long. This is the first dose. You wrap your hand around the cup. The metal is cold, and the chill passes through your fingers into your palm. You hesitate. Somewhere beyond the door, footsteps echo down the hallway, steady, measured. Not in any rush. You drink. It's colder than expected, coating your tongue in a way that makes your throat tense. There's no immediate taste, only that faint, metallic temps. But seconds later, warmth seeps into your chest, blooming outward in slow waves. Then the tingling starts, first in your fingertips, then in your toes, like someone's tracing them with a fine electric wire. "You will not sleep tonight," the man says simply, setting the empty vial aside. "Nor tomorrow. Your body will adapt. Your mind." He pauses, and for the first time his tone dips lower. "We will observe." He turns his back to record something on a clipboard. The pen scratches with the precision of someone who is used to documenting changes that don't always make sense to the subject. The guards open the door without a word, and you're led to the barracks. Inside, 6 cots stand in 2 neat rows. 4 are already occupied by men in varying states of rest, one lying with hands folded across his chest, another propped up on his elbows, staring at nothing in particular. A 5th cot holds only a folded blanket and a pair of boots at perfect right angles. You choose the last cot in the far corner. The mattress is thin, the wool blanket scratchy, smelling faintly of mothballs and something earthier like an old cellar that's absorbed decades of damp air. For several minutes, the only sounds are breathing, the occasional shift of fabric, and the faint hum that's followed you from the hallway. Eventually, one of the men, the one with a small notebook, leans slightly toward you. His hair is close-cropped, and his jaw looks like it was cut from a block of stone. "New?" he asks quietly. You nod. They tell you what this is. His tone suggests he already knows the answer. They said, "No sleep, better stamina." He gives a humorless smile. That's the advertisement. The real thing. You'll figure it out before too long. You want to ask what he means, but he's already looking away, tucking the notebook under his pillow like a secret. Time becomes slippery in the barracks. There's no clock, no window, just the unblinking buzz of fluorescent light. You'd expect fatigue to creep in after hours of travel, but instead, you feel a strange, crystalline clarity. It's not the jitter of caffeine or the burn of adrenaline. It's cleaner, sharper, as if your body has decided that sleep is now a pointless concept. Your senses are dialed higher. You can hear the faint scuff of a guard's boot in the hallway. You notice the subtle unevenness in the paint above your cot, as though a patch had been covered and repainted. Even the wool fibers of your blanket feel more distinct, prickling against your wrist like tiny bristles. The door opens without warning, and a guard steps in. He doesn't speak. He simply walks the length of the room, his eyes moving from face to face, as if ticking names off an invisible list. When he stops at your cot, you meet his gaze. His expression remains unreadable, but the corner of his mouth twitches approval, or perhaps recognition. Then he moves on. The others don't react. Minutes or maybe hours pass before you realize your fingers have been tapping a rhythm against your thigh. You weren't aware of starting dot, and then, from somewhere deeper in the facility, a door slams. The sound echoes through the concrete bones of the building. No one says anything, but several heads turn toward the noise before snapping back forward. The hum grows louder. Or maybe it's just that now you're listening for it. The slam still rings faintly in your ears as you lie back on the cot, staring at the flat, white ceiling. You tell yourself it's just a door, someone careless, someone in a hurry, but here, even small sounds take on an unnatural weight. The other men seem to be thinking the same thing. No one moves for several long minutes, as if acknowledging the noise might make it more dangerous. The hum, steady and low, becomes the soundtrack to this stillness. At times, it feels mechanical, like the purr of a distant generator. Other times, it seems almost alive, a vibration you can feel in your teeth. It should be the middle of the night. Your body, at least, insists that's the case. But you don't feel tired. Not a shred of heaviness in your eyelids, not a single yawn bubbling up. The doctor's words echo in your mind. You will not sleep tonight, nor tomorrow. The man with the notebook breaks the silence again. "Name's Kraus," he says quietly, not looking at you. You tell him. He nods once, eyes still on some invisible point in the distance. You'll start to notice things, little things, corners of the room you never thought to look at, shadows that don't match the objects. He scratches his jaw. That's when you know it's working. You almost laugh, because it sounds absurd. But something about his tone makes it impossible to dismiss. Hours, if they are hours, pass. You find yourself pacing the room, not because you're restless, but because sitting still feels wrong, like trying to breathe underwater. Every so often, you pass by the barracks door, hearing faint noises from beyond it, a shuffle of paper, the muted clang of metal, what might be muffled conversation in a language you can't quite place. Finally, the door opens. To guards enter, flanking the same officer who met you in the central hub earlier. His hair is still perfect, not a strand out of place. He carries a small ledger under one arm. "Follow me," he says, his tone brisk but unhurried. You're led down a new corridor this time, past doors marked archive, infirmary, and supply. The paint changes here, less green, more gray, like the place itself has shifted tone. The air smells different too, drier and carrying a faint temps of ozone. The hallway ends in a steel door with a narrow glass slit. On the other side, you can make out a large, dimly lit room. When the door opens, you step into what feels like the heart of the facility. Rows of desks are arranged in perfect symmetry, each with a set of equipment you don't recognize: oscilloscopes, strange wired helmets, thick cables coiled like snakes. Against one wall, a tall chalkboard is filled with equations and diagrams, some of which look more like anatomical sketches than mathematics. A man in a black uniform stands at the front of the room. His voice is smooth, almost too smooth, like a salesman delivering a pitch. "Gentlemen," he begins, "you have been chosen because you possess the qualities necessary for prolonged vigilance, endurance, discipline, obedience." He walks slowly between the desks, his boots silent on the floor. Over the coming days, you will participate in a program designed to sharpen these qualities beyond the reach of ordinary men. You will not sleep, you will not tire, you will remain focused while the world around you blurs. He stops in front of you, just long enough for his gaze to hold yours. "And we will see what remains of you when all the rest is stripped away." Kraus shifts slightly in his seat beside you. You glance down and see his hands flexing, as though testing his grip on something invisible. The officer gestures toward the back of the room. You will each be assigned a station. When the light above your desk turns red, you will take your dose. You notice the bottles identical to the one you were given earlier, lined neatly along the rear counter. The hum is louder here. You can feel it through the soles of your boots, a steady pulse running up your legs. Historians still argue whether such no-sleep programs were ever officially sanctioned, or if they were conducted off-record by units acting on their own authority. The records that remain are fragmentary at best, and those who participated rarely spoke openly about what they endured. The red light above your desk clicks on. The red light doesn't blink or flash, it just glows there, steady and insistent, casting a faint crimson halo over the metal surface of your desk. It reminds you of an on-air sign in a radio booth, except here there's no audience, no applause, just a quiet understanding that when the light turns on, the next step begins. No orders are spoken. The officer at the front of the room doesn't raise his voice or even make a gesture. Yet somehow, you know exactly what's expected. You push back your chair, the scrape of its legs sounding far too loud in this tightly sealed room, and walk to the counter along the back wall. The vials are laid out with military precision, same size, same shape, same pale liquid, lined up like chess pieces, waiting for a match to start. The labels are neat and deliberate, printed in blocky black lettering that hints at German, but with certain words you don't quite recognize. You reach for one. It's cool against your palm, almost as if it's been pulled from a refrigerator, though you've seen no such equipment in here. Kraus is beside you, his steps slow and deliberate, as though this act taking the vial is a ritual that must be performed without rushing. He glances at your hand, then at your face, before tipping his own dose into a small metal cup. You follow his lead. The liquid slides out with a faint, syrupy weight. The smell hits you a second later, not sharp, but dense, something between damp metal and the bitterness of crushed aspirin. This time, the taste is different, not stronger or weaker, but altered somehow. The metallic temps is still there, but it's muted, replaced with a bitterness that clings to the back of your tongue. You swallow, it hits faster. Within moments, the warmth blooms in your chest and spreads outward, like a slow wave, radiating into your arms and legs. Then comes the tingling, not just in your fingertips and toes, but along the inside of your skull, as though something is gently brushing against your thoughts. The officer's eyes flick briefly to you before he looks back to the ledger in his hands. He makes no comment. Simply waits until everyone has taken their dose and returned to their desks. The next task is deceptively simple. A small white card is placed at the center of your desk. On it is a single black dot, perfectly round. Keep your eyes on the dot, the officer says evenly. Do not blink until you are told. It sounds ridiculous, childish, something from a magician's warm-up trick. But as the seconds pass, you realize it's not the task itself that matters, it's what happens to you while you're doing it. The first minute is fine, the second is tolerable. By the third, your eyes begin to sting. They're dry, irritated, but the idea of blinking feels wrong. The room's edges start to shimmer faintly in your peripheral vision. It's not a hallucination, exactly more like heat waves rising from asphalt, distorting the air. The hum is still there, low and steady, but now it's different, more insistent, almost syncing with your pulse. Kraus breaks first. His blink is quick, almost violent, and he turns away as if embarrassed. The man on your other side lasts a little longer, his jaw clenched, but eventually his eyes flick shut for a fraction of a second. And when they open again, he looks momentarily dazed, as though waking from a dream. Your own vision starts to swim. The dot seems to shift slightly, sliding a millimeter to the left, and then back again. You're sure it hasn't moved, but the certainty wavers. Finally, the officer says, "Enough." The relief is almost physical as you blink once, twice, feeling the moisture flood back into your eyes. The officer doesn't congratulate anyone. He doesn't scold either. He simply makes a note in the ledger, the scratch of his pen sounding far too loud in the stillness. You're escorted back toward the barracks, but this time you don't take the same route as before. You pass through a narrower corridor, the ceiling lower, the air cooler. The light here is dimmer, tinted slightly yellow dot. At the far end, a heavy steel door stands ajar. Through the gap, you catch a fleeting glimpse of the room beyond. It's small, barely larger than a storage closet, but the walls are lined from floor to ceiling with mirrors. They reflect each other endlessly, creating an illusion of depth that feels dizzying even from the hallway. In the exact center of the room is a single metal chair, facing the door. Before you can look longer, one of the guards notices and pushes the door shut with a flat palm. The latch clicks. Back in the barracks, the atmosphere feels different. The men are quieter than before, their movements slower, more deliberate. The pacing man from earlier is still at it, walking the same measured path between the cots, his boots thudding softly against the floor. The dark-haired soldier now sits cross-legged on his bed, his lips moving in soundless repetition, like he's reciting a prayer or a list. You drop onto your cot. The blanket feels rougher somehow, as though the fibers have stiffened in your absence. You still don't feel tired, not in the slightest, but there's a growing tightness in your skull. A subtle inner pressure like the air before a thunderstorm. The smallest noises stand out in sharp detail. The whisper of fabric as someone shifts under their blanket. The faint creak of the cot frame when Kraus leans back. The muffled tick of a pipe expanding somewhere in the wall. Even your own breathing feels louder, as though the air has thinned. And then, just when the silence feels like it might stretch forever, you hear it, a laugh, thin, high-pitched, not the sharp burst of amusement, but a wavering thread of sound that continues without pause. It seems to come from one of the occupied cots, though you can't tell which. It doesn't stop. The laugh is wrong, not just because it's out of place here, though it is, absurdly so, but because of the way it clings to the air, like a thin layer of frost over warm metal. It has no rhythm, no natural rise and fall, just that trembling, almost wheezing persistence. Heads lift. Even the pacing man stops mid-step, his foot suspended in the air before he sets it down again. The sound continues, wobbling between registers, until finally it cuts off with a sharp inhale. Silence drops. Hard. You glance across the room. The source is a man you've barely noticed before. Slight build, pale skin, hair cropped so short it's almost invisible against his scalp. He's sitting bolt upright on his cot, knees drawn tight to his chest, arms wrapped around them. His lips are still parted, as though the laugh could spill out again at any moment. He doesn't blink. Kraus shifts on his bed, leaning forward slightly. "Easy," he murmurs, but it's unclear whether he's speaking to the man or to himself. The pale soldier tilts his head, just a fraction. "It tickles," he says softly, in an accent you can't place. His voice is calm to calm, but the way his fingers twitch against his knees suggests something else entirely. "Inside, in here." He taps his temple twice with a knuckle. "You feel that same faint pressure in your own skull, though it's not painful yet, just present." One of the guards approaches, his boots whispering against the floor. There's no drawn weapon, no barked order, just a slow, deliberate motion as he places a hand on the man's shoulder. The pale soldier flinches not violently, but as if the contact startled him. The guard leans in close and says something too low for you to catch. Whatever it is, the effect is immediate. The man lies down without protest, pulling the blanket over his head like a child hiding from a nightmare. The guard walks out without another word. You want to ask Kraus what just happened, but you don't. There's an unspoken rule forming. In your mind now, too many questions draw attention. And attention is dangerous here. The hum returns. It's softer this time, but you're sure it wasn't there a moment ago. Not a mechanical hum exactly. There's an organic undertone to it, as though something alive is producing the sound. The frequency seems to match your heartbeat, and you catch yourself breathing in time with it. The sensation in your skull deepens. Not pressure now, more like movement. You close your eyes, hoping to steady yourself, but instead, you see patterns. Jagged white lines against a dark backdrop, shifting and curling like frost forming on glass. The lines pulse faintly, synchronized with the hum. Your eyes snap open. The room looks the same, rows of cots, men lying or sitting, but for an instant. Each figure seems slightly blurred around the edges, like heat haze distorting their outlines. You blink once, and it's gone. Kraus is watching you, not with concern, exactly more like curiosity. As if he's studying a reaction in a test subject. "You'll get used to it," he says quietly. "What is it?" you ask, before you can stop yourself. Kraus's mouth twitches in something that might be a smile, but never fully forms. It doesn't matter what it is, only that it's working. The words lodge in your mind. Working. The implication chills you more than the cold air in the barracks ever could. You lie back, staring at the ceiling. The hum fades again, but the ghost of it lingers, like the afterimage of a bright light, burned into your vision. You wonder how many days or nights you've been here. You try to count backward, to remember the last time you saw the sun, but the sequence breaks apart in your mind. Numbers sliding away like beads on a broken string. Somewhere down the hall, a door slams. Footsteps follow fast, heavy, deliberate. They're coming closer. A few of the men sit straighter. Others curl in on themselves, pretending to sleep. Kraus doesn't move. The footsteps stop just outside your door. There's a pause too long to be casual. Then the door swings open with a slow, steady creak. A man steps inside, wearing a lab coat over a Wehrmacht officer's uniform. His hair is slicked back so tightly it gleams in the light. He carries no clipboard, no papers, just a small metal case in one hand. He scans the room without speaking, eyes flicking from face to face. When they settle on you, something in your chest tightens. "No more F&F," he says finally, his voice clipped, almost bored. It takes you a second to realize he means you. The metal case clicks open. Inside is a syringe, already filled with a clear, faintly viscous liquid. The sight of it makes your pulse trip over itself. Kraus looks away. The pale man under the blanket lets out a single, muffled giggle. The officer gestures for you to stand. The cold from the concrete floor seeps through the thin soles of your boots, creeping upward into your shins as the steel door closes behind you with a muted clunk. The kind of sound that feels final, even if you can't quite explain why. The guard ahead doesn't look back, his heavy boots striking the floor in a steady, mechanical rhythm that seems to sync with your own pulse. The corridor stretches forward in narrow angles, its walls painted in that institutional gray-green that manages to feel both dull and oppressive at the same time. The light above is neither truly white nor yellow, more of a washed-out, buzzing pallor that flickers every so often, casting everything in a brief, ghostly strobe. You try to recall the last night you slept a full 8 hours and find only a blank, like a missing page from a book you used to know by heart. You suspect that memory, like warmth, is something you might never get back. The guard takes a sharp right turn without warning, and then another, leading you deeper into a warren of hallways that erase any sense of direction. At one point, you pass a door left slightly ajar. Inside, you glimpse a row of metal tables, each with shallow grooves and leather straps bolted to the surface. There are metal trays beside them, holding glass vials filled with liquid the color of oversteeped tea, alongside needles that glint faintly under the dim light. You look away quickly, but not before noticing the faint reddish stains that no amount of scrubbing could remove. You keep moving. The air changes subtly the further you go, carrying a sterile tang of disinfectant layered over something older and less pleasant, like wet iron and spoiled paper. Somewhere deeper in the building, a machine hums with an intermittent whir, its pitch rising and falling like a strange mechanical breath. The sound reminds you of the wind, but there is no wind here, only the stale exhalation of ventilation. Fans turning at a lazy pace, the guard finally stops before a double set of doors, painted the same dead green but scuffed at shin height, where boots have kicked them open countless times. Without looking at you, he pushes them wide, revealing a larger room bathed in stronger, colder light. The brightness forces your eyes to adjust, and in the blur, you register several figures in long coats, their faces masked not with cloth but with rigid, curved respirators that make them look like insects. One of them gestures impatiently, and the guard moves you forward into the room. The floor here is not concrete but white tile, cracked in places, and the walls are lined with cabinets containing rows of bottles labeled in blocky German script. In the center, there's a single steel chair with straps on its arms and legs. The straps are worn, edges fraying slightly, as if they've restrained many before you. A clipboard rests on a nearby trolley, with lines of neat handwriting. Your number is at the top, circled in red pencil. You feel the tug of 2 sets of hands as the masked figures guide you toward the chair. The straps feel cool at first, against your wrists, then tighten until the pulse in your hands feels slow and heavy. One of them checks your eyes with a penlight, making you blink against the sudden glare. He mutters something to the others, a string of syllables you catch only halfway, words like watch bleiben, stay awake, and Versek FNF, experiment 5. Another approaches, with a syringe, the needle thin and unnervingly long, the glass barrel filled with a fluid that seems almost to shimmer under the overhead lights. You want to ask what it is, but your tongue feels heavy, your mouth dry. There's a small sting as the needle pierces skin, then a slow push as the liquid slides into your veins. At first, nothing, just the faint pressure in your arm. Then, like a fuse being lit, heat blooms in your chest and spreads outward, meeting the cold in your limbs and pushing it back. Your heartbeat picks up, fast enough that you can feel it in your fingertips. The room sharpens every line of tile, every scratch on the metal surfaces. The subtle fog inside the respirator lenses, all of it becomes uncomfortably vivid. You notice a loose thread on the coat of the man by the trolley, swaying with his slightest movement, and for a moment you can't look away from it. Somewhere, a clock ticks, and you realize you can hear not just the tick, but the faint click of the internal mechanism resetting itself. The masked figures move around you with increasing speed, or Maybe they've always moved like this, and now you can track every tiny motion. You're speaking before you realize it, words spilling out in short bursts, half questions, half nonsense, your mind running faster than your mouth can follow. The air feels sharper now, almost cutting in your nose and throat, and the hum of that distant machine is suddenly layered with other sounds, voices in the hallway. A door opening 2 rooms away, the squeak of rubber soles. One of them holds up 2 fingers in front of your face, and you find yourself nodding rapidly, even though you're not sure what he asked. The heat in your chest has become something else, like a restless energy coiled and waiting for an outlet. Your thoughts are branching, splitting into too many directions at once. One part of you counting the floor tiles, another reciting the serial number from the clipboard, another wondering why the smell of disinfectant is suddenly sweeter, almost like overripe fruit. Historians still debate whether these wakefulness injections were derived from pure amphetamine or some secret military blend designed to push soldiers far past normal limits. In the moment, all you know is that the idea of sleep now feels absurd, almost offensive. Your eyelids no longer feel heavy, your body no longer sluggish, and yet there's a cost you can't quite name, an undercurrent of something fraying at the edges. The man with the clipboard writes something, his pen scratching so loudly against the paper you'd swear he was carving into stone. Another figure checks your pulse, mutters a number, and you catch a rare, unmasked face as one of them adjusts his respirator, pale, with eyes that don't meet yours, and you can't tell if that's because he's avoiding you, or because you've already become more object than person to him. You're unstrapped without ceremony, your arms and legs tingling as blood rushes back into them. The guard from before is suddenly at your side again, leading you out another door at the far end of the room. The corridor beyond feels narrower, the air warmer, and you realize the drug is still climbing, still taking hold. Shadows stretch longer than they should, and for a moment you think you hear the same footsteps you're making echoing ahead of you, as if someone invisible is walking just out of sight. The guard doesn't slow his pace, his stride relentless, almost as if he knows that if you stop now, the drug might turn on you, might twist that restless energy into something less controllable. The hallway narrows again, walls drawing close, enough that your elbows could brush them if you extended your arms, the green paint chipped to reveal raw concrete underneath. The light overhead feels harsher than before, and you realize it's not actually brighter, it's that your eyes have become painfully sensitive. Every flicker stabbing at your pupils like needles. Somewhere ahead, you hear a faint dripping, sound irregular, each drop separated by the hollow pause of the building's stillness. The air is warmer here, heavy with humidity that clings to your skin, and the smell shifts, again less sterile now, more organic, the kind of scent that doesn't belong in a military facility unless something has gone wrong. You turn a corner, and the source of the dripping reveals itself, a shallow trench cut into the floor, running along the base of the wall, carrying a slow trickle of dark water, or at least you hope it's water. It disappears into a grated drain, where you can hear it joining a deeper, unseen current far below. Your mind catches on the sound, looping it over and over, until the guard barks something sharp in German that snaps you out of it. The corridor ends at a set of reinforced double doors. These ones painted black and fitted with a small observation window covered in wire mesh. The guard pulls a key from his belt, the metal jingling with a sound so precise it feels like you can count the individual collisions of each ring. The lock turns with a deep, mechanical clunk, and he pushes the door open to reveal a room that feels entirely different from the others, darker, quieter, but no less suffocating. The floor is concrete again, but stained in ways the light refuses to clarify. A single bulb swings faintly overhead, its chain rattling softly as though someone recently brushed against it. In the far corner, a shape sits hunched on a low stool, its head bowed, arms dangling limply between its knees. For a moment, you think it's another prisoner. But when the guard steps forward and lifts the figure's chin, you see the slack jaw and the unfocused eyes live, but barely. His skin is pale, lips cracked, and there's a faint sheen of sweat across his forehead. The guard lets go, and the head drops again, too heavy for the man to hold up on his own. A voice behind you speaks, low and clinical, and you realize someone else has entered the room without you noticing. The tone is detached, the way someone might discuss the maintenance schedule for a machine. You catch phrases like noon, tage, 9 days, and keen schlaf, no sleep, and suddenly, it clicks. Man in the corner isn't just tired, he's the end result of whatever they've just started in you. The guard glances at you briefly, then gestures toward the figure, as if this is a preview, a warning, or maybe just an inevitability. Your heart is still racing from the injection, but now there's a new rhythm underneath it, something like dread threading through the euphoria. The masked man steps forward, holding a small, battered notebook, and begins asking you questions: your name, your age, the last time you ate, the last time you slept. His voice is calm, but his eyes are sharp, measuring not your words, but the way you respond, the speed, the tone, the hesitation. Every answer feels too fast, tumbling out before you can even think. You try to slow down, but the drug fights you, pushing each syllable out with manic precision. The man scribbles notes, his handwriting as neat and methodical as the one on the clipboard in the previous room. He doesn't look up when the guard moves toward the far wall, pulling open a narrow metal cabinet. Inside, you glimpse rows of bottles and jars, some filled with clear liquid, others with substances the color of rust or ash. The guard takes something from the middle shelf, tucks it under his arm, and closes the door with a hollow ring. You expect him to take you back to the barracks, but instead the masked man tells you to follow. The drug makes obedience feel easy, almost pleasurably want to keep moving, to keep doing something, anything, because the idea of standing still is unbearable. The next hallway is even narrower, the walls pressing in like the throat of some vast animal, and you begin to wonder whether they're leading you in circles. Then, without warning, the space opens into another room, not as bright as the laboratory, but filled with the same cold, metallic smell. In the center is a long wooden table, scarred with knife marks, its surface scattered with scraps of paper, twisted bits of wire, and a few unidentifiable objects wrapped in stained cloth. Along one wall, a row of low beds is set flush against the concrete, each one with a thin blanket folded precisely at the foot. Only one is occupied: a man lying on his back, eyes open but unseeing, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. His lips move now and then, forming words you can't hear. The masked man gestures for you to sit on the edge of the nearest bed. You do, the mattress sagging under your weight. He speaks again, and the guard translates in broken phrases. You will stay here now. You will not sleep. You will be watched. You sit there on the edge of the cot, the metal frame faintly cold against the backs of your legs, your fingers tracing over the rough weave of the wool blanket, as if memorizing its pattern might anchor you to something real. Because at this point, the boundary between reality and whatever your mind is cooking up feels thin, as the ice that forms on the surface of a puddle overnight and cracks under the slightest touch. The air in here tastes like dust and disinfectant, with just a shadow of something metallic you can't quite name. Maybe the pipes, maybe blood. Or maybe it's just the way your brain is starting to file smells into the wrong folders. The dim light from the single bulb overhead is steady now, but your eyes keep catching phantom flickers, like it's winking at you when you're not looking directly at it, and the hum has settled into a pitch that almost matches the faint ringing in your ears. The two tones blending into something that could almost be a chord if you didn't know better, and you find yourself wondering if the walls are vibrating. You press your palm against the nearest one, the cool, concrete, unyielding, but you swear you can feel a pulse through it, as if the building itself has a heartbeat, and you're close enough to feel it in your bones. You remember the masked man passing by earlier, and for a second you think you see his silhouette at the end of the corridor again. But when you blink, it's gone, replaced by the shadow of a chair that hasn't moved in hours. You tell yourself you're imagining it, but the little hairs on your arms lift anyway, and somewhere behind the wall, maybe in the next room, maybe 3 floors down, you hear a clink of glass, a pause, then something like a sigh or maybe steam escaping, and your mind immediately decides it's someone exhaling after watching you through a vent. Because of course that's how your mind works now. Suspicious of air currents, you shift your weight and the cot creaks louder than it should. The sound ricocheting around the small space like it's looking for an escape, and you almost apologize out loud for making noise, but then you realize how absurd that is. You're not supposed to be polite to the furniture. And that thought makes you almost laugh, a sharp, too loud sound in the stillness, and you clamp your mouth shut, listening for footsteps, because in this place, laughter feels like something you're not allowed to have. And sure enough, there's a faint shuffle somewhere down the hall, a rhythm too slow to be casual, deliberate, like someone pacing themselves for dramatic effect. You focus on the sound, trying to tell if it's getting closer or just echoing oddly in the corridor. Your sense of direction is shot, so it could be either, and the pacing is strange, like they're pausing every few steps, maybe to listen, maybe to think, maybe to make sure you're thinking about them, which, congratulations, is working perfectly. You run your thumb along the edge of the blanket again, and notice that you've been doing it hard enough to leave little dents in the fabric. There's a small voice in your head telling you, this is the drug talking that they warned you about. Mild perceptual distortions, though you think they undersold that description, like calling a hurricane a bit of wind. And another voice, not yours, whispers that maybe the footsteps aren't footsteps at all, but your own heartbeat magnified and looped through the vents, and for a terrifying second you believe it, because it fits. And you're starting to see patterns in the scuffs on the floor, shapes that definitely weren't there before. One looks like a bird, another like a map of Europe, but the borders are wrong, as if someone has redrawn the world while you weren't paying attention. And the more you stare, the more the shapes start to shift, melting into each other. And you rub your eyes, which was a mistake, because now there's a swirl of color in the darkness behind your eyelids. A pulse of light that feels synced to that hum in the walls. And you're not sure if you're still sitting up or if you've leaned forward, because suddenly your balance tips and you have to catch yourself with one hand on the floor. The cold of the concrete grounding you for a moment, your palm flat, fingers spread, feeling every tiny grit under your skin. The dust sticking slightly to your sweat, and the idea flashes in your mind that maybe you could trace a message in it. Something small, something only you would understand. But then you think about who might find it later, and whether they'd know it was you. And that makes you hesitate, because leaving a mark here feels like inviting attention, and you're not sure you want attention from anyone in this building, least of all the people with keys to the doors. You push yourself upright again, and the movement makes the chain on the light swing slightly, just enough to send shadows sliding along the wall. And for half a second, one of those shadows has shoulders, a head, the outline of a person standing far too close. But when you look up, it's gone, leaving only the bare wall and the dust motes, dancing in the cone of light like they don't know they're in a room meant for experiments. And that's when you hear it again, the slow, careful steps, definitely closer now. You can tell by the way they fade in between beats of the hum, like a predator in tall grass. And your mouth is suddenly dry, the back of your throat catching when you swallow. You remind yourself of something one of the other subjects said about the guards being bored, about them walking just to stretch their legs, but you don't believe it, because boredom doesn't have this kind of timing. Boredom doesn't make you wait between each step just long enough to imagine the next one. Boredom doesn't make you grip the blanket so hard your knuckles ache, the steps stop just beyond your door, and you can almost hear the space between you and whoever's out there fill with tension, the kind that makes the air seem heavier, and in that silence, your own breathing sounds like a giveaway. So you try to hold it, counting in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But on 6, the urge to breathe wins, and you inhale too fast. Loud enough that you know they heard, and yet they don't move. No knock, no rattle of the handle, just stillness. As if they're waiting for you to say something first, and you think about calling out, "Who's there?" But the idea of giving your voice to the corridor feels dangerous. Like tossing a coin into dark water, you won't get it back, and so you stay silent. The hum in the walls, now a backdrop to the slow realization that you've been holding yourself perfectly still for too long, your muscles starting to twitch from the effort. And when you finally let yourself shift your weight, the cot groans again, and this time, faintly, you hear what might be a breath on the other side of the door, soft, deliberate, like they're matching yours on purpose. You don't even realize you've stopped blinking until your eyes start to sting. A slow burn at the edges that spreads inward like frost creeping across glass. But you're afraid that if you close them, even for a heartbeat, you'll miss something that might explain the breath you swear you heard. The one that wasn't yours, wasn't shaped like yours, a little heavier, a little wetter, as though whoever it belonged to had just come in from the cold and their lungs were still thawing. And there's a moment where your mind tries to tell you it could have been the pipes, maybe the building's heating system, exhaling in sympathy. But then another part of youth apart that's been sitting on the edge of every shadow. These last sleepless days reminds you that pipes don't wait for your breathing to match before answering. That pipes don't have the patience to stand there for minutes without moving, so you keep your gaze fixed on the door as if you could see through it by sheer will. The chipped paint and scratches forming little constellations you've never noticed before. One that looks almost like a dog's head, another like a crooked cross, and you catch yourself wondering how many people stared at this same door before you, how many of them saw the same shapes, how many didn't make it out to tell anyone. And your mind flickers to that guard with the bandaged hand, the one who wouldn't meet your eyes. And you imagine for just a moment that maybe he stood here once, on this side, waiting for someone else to open up. Maybe the door never opened for him either. Maybe he's still waiting, trapped in some loop, like the ones that are starting to play in your own head, the same thoughts circling back every few minutes, but feeling new each time. The drug has a way of making repetition feel like revelation. So when the reflections in the shard explode and fold in intricate fractal layers, corridors stacked impossibly, staircases that defy logic, laboratories frozen mid-experiment, shadowed figures moving in trajectories that seem both random and deliberate, pausing, dissolving, and reappearing like ghosts of history. You remember reading reports of clandestine World War II facilities, where prisoners were subjected to long-term sleep deprivation, sensory overstimulation, and carefully monitored experiments on perception and endurance, and you feel a visceral kinship with them, a recognition of the psychological intensity, the precision, and the absolute control such spaces imposed. Historians still debate whether these experiments were entirely scientific or veiled exercises in human manipulation, but here, in the pulse, the shard, the vapor, the reflections, and the tapping, the distinction becomes meaningless. You are living a fragment of that hidden history, immersive and undeniable. The masked man lifts the shard slightly, tilts it to catch the vapor curling above, and the reflections flare, showing glimpses of impossible layers of space corridors, staircases, and rooms interlaced in patterns that bend reality itself. Figures appear, shadowed and ambiguous, moving against the impossible angles, sometimes pausing mid-stride, folding through themselves, leaving faint traces in the reflections and in your mind. The tapping evolves again, more intricate, irregular, unpredictable, merging fully with the floor's vibration, the shard's warmth, and the hum, forming a complex rhythm that seems to communicate in an untranslatable language, not of words, but of endurance, perception, and unbroken attention. You feel pulled further into it, body and mind vibrating in resonance, every neuron alert, every fiber of your being integrated into this living experiment. The warmth pulses along your arms, threads across your shoulders, climbs into your chest, threading your body with the rhythm that now feels almost sentient, almost aware, as if the room itself is calibrating you, testing your limits, observing the depth of your endurance. Your vision shifts between reflections, vapor, and shadows, catching glimpses of historical corridors, abandoned laboratories, sealed vaults, and hallways where experiments were conducted decades ago, frozen yet alive in memory, and you feel a weight of historical continuity pressing upon you, the knowledge that those long-hidden experiments converge here. Now, through pulse, reflection, vapor, and observation, your breathing, once voluntary, is now entirely subsumed into the rhythm. Every inhale, every exhale matches the pulse beneath your feet, the warmth in the shard, and the vibration threading through the walls. You feel as though you are both entirely present and entirely dissolved, a node in a living historical continuum, stretching across time and perception. The masked man tilts the shard again, and the reflections cascade, folding and unfolding, like a kaleidoscope, revealing glimpses of hallways stacked in impossible arrays, laboratories with frozen equipment, and figures paused mid-action, reminding you that history itself is layered, complex, and sometimes impossible to fully witness. The tapping slows subtly, the hum deepens, the shard's warmth pulses in gentle waves, and the reflections begin to coalesce, forming shapes that are calmer, more legible, more like memory itself, an acknowledgement of your endurance and presence, a quiet release after prolonged intensity. You realize fully that you have survived, not merely by chance, but by fully merging with the room. The masked man, the shard, the pulse, and the hidden echoes of history's most secret experiments. Each reflection, each vibration, each whisper, has left a mark, a resonance, an imprint of perception intertwined with endurance and observation. The vapor drifts slowly now, the shard pulses in fading warmth, the low hum recedes into a gentle background presence, and the reflections shimmer, softly, almost reassuringly, as if the room itself recognizes your integration, your awareness, your survival. In this suspended, enveloping calm, you feel a cohesion of body, mind, and environment, a final, perfect unification of perception, history, and endurance. A living echo of the experiments that once tested the boundaries of human experience. The masked man leans back slightly, gloved hands resting still, and the shard's light fades gently, vapor curling languidly, reflections settling into a still, luminous calm. You are left suspended in awareness, fully present, yet profoundly changed, carrying the pulse, the rhythm, and the resonance of an experience that bridges past and present, perception and endurance, observation and participation, in a continuity that is both terrifying and beautiful. A final affirmation of your survival and integration. The pulse has softened, the shard's warmth ebbing like a tide retreating from the shore, leaving behind only a lingering hum that threads gently through your limbs, your chest, your thoughts. The vapor curls lazily now, rising and dispersing, no longer a tangible presence pressing against your legs, and the reflections settle into quiet. Still surfaces calm and familiar, like glass catching the first light of dawn. You take a deep, unhurried breath, noticing how each inhale fills your lungs fully. Each exhale releases tension you hadn't realized was lodged inside, and the room feels less like an experiment and more like a quiet chamber of memory, a place where past and present, perception and reflection, history and endurance can rest together, softly, without demand. The masked man leans back, still and serene, no longer an imposing presence, but a subtle reminder that even the most overwhelming experiences can be observed, absorbed, and ultimately released. Your fingers loosen around the shard, and though it continues to radiate a gentle pulse, It no longer dominates your senses, allowing you to simply exist in the moment, aware yet unstrained, present yet relaxed. You notice the faint scent of earth and iron lingering, comforting in its tangibility. And the soft background hum blends with your heartbeat and breath until it is impossible to separate them. A quiet symphony of calm and continuity. The reflections on the shard remind you of the layered histories you have glimpsed, the secret experiments, the endurance tests, and you feel a strange, peaceful kinship with all who came before, aware that what was hidden can be held gently, in memory, without fear. Now, as your eyes settle, your body unwinds, and your mind drifts on the gentle currents of pulse, warmth, and quiet observation. You can release the tension, let the sensations fade slowly, and simply be